The clowning was relaxation for me. I enjoyed entertaining kids. Like some people are, you know, they unwind in different ways, either by going out drinking or that. I could put on clown makeup and I was relaxed, and I
How,
enjoyed doing it.
that,
It was only twice a month that I did
yeah,
it.
this was not used then for a lure to draw kids to you as
No, we would visit different hospitals and entertain the children there. And we didn't entertain them with handcuffs or anything like that. All we used was balloon animals and small toys and stuff like that. But we also did parades. And in the summertime, like on 4th of July, I used to be in 4 parades in one day. I've always told people when I got into clown makeup, I regressed into childhood. It was fun being a clown because you could be yourself, or just let yourself go and act a fool. You could be slapstick and funny and have a good time. That's why I always enjoyed clowning. Clowning has taken a bad name because of what they've used in my case.
In December 1978, Chicago police were just beginning to uncover the evidence of one of the most disturbing crimes their city had ever seen. As body after body was recovered from beneath the floorboards of a seemingly ordinary suburban home, investigators realized they were dealing with America's most dangerous criminal. John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, had taken more lives than any one person in U.S. history at that point in time. John Wayne Gacy was a well-known and well-liked figure in his suburban community north of Chicago. He owned a successful construction business, attended church faithfully, and was active in the local Polish community. He was married to his second wife and appeared to be a devoted stepfather to her 2 daughters. Through his position as a precinct captain for the Democratic Party, Gacy had the opportunity to meet and be photographed with First Lady Rosalind Carter in early 1978. The very same year, his crimes would be exposed. At that time, Gacy was loved and admired by his neighbors, his friends, and the police, and was well known for hosting elaborate parties for the entire neighborhood. Gacy's alter ego, Pogo the Clown, was often a feature of these gatherings. Neighbors recall that he seemed to genuinely enjoy dressing up in his clown costume and entertaining local children. He was charming. He was generous. He was everything a good neighbor was supposed to be. But underneath Gacy's seemingly perfect suburban life, he was hiding a dark and violent past. Prior to moving to Chicago, Gacy had been living in Iowa, where his father-in-law owned 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants that Gacy managed. He had a wife. He had children. He had everything that looked like a normal life. Then, in 1968, it all fell apart. 2 teenage boys came forward and reported what Gacy had been doing to them. He had been luring them, exploiting them, and committing serious offenses against them. Gacy was arrested, and, in November of that year, pleaded guilty to 1 count of a serious criminal offense against a minor. The court sentenced him to 10 years in prison. His wife filed for divorce the very same day, but Gacy presented himself as a model prisoner. He earned his GED, joined the Jaycees, and worked the system to his advantage. After serving just 18 months of his sentence, he was released on parole and given permission to relocate to Chicago for a fresh start. His criminal record in Iowa was eventually sealed. The world would soon learn that this was one of the most consequential decisions the justice system ever made. Back in Chicago, Gacy bought a ranch-style house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park Township. He started a construction business called PDM Contractors. He remarried, he threw parties, he dressed up as Pogo the Clown for parades and charity events. He was, by all appearances, a reformed man. He was not. After his second marriage ended in 1976, Gacy began living entirely on his own terms. And with no one watching closely, he allowed the darkest side of his nature to take over completely. He had discovered that ending a life gave him a sense of control and satisfaction that nothing else could provide. For the next several years, he would pursue that feeling again and again, leaving a trail of missing young men behind him. He targeted his victims methodically. He would approach young men, often those who were drifting, far from home, or simply looking for work. He would offer them a job, a drink, a place to stay. He had a signature move he called a magic trick, convincing them to put on handcuffs as part of a supposed demonstration. Once the cuffs were on, the trick was over. There was no way out. Gacy would overpower his victim, take their life, and then conceal the body beneath his own home. 29 young men were buried on that property before anyone came looking. It all started to unravel for Gacy with the disappearance of Robert Piest. December 11th, 1978. Robert's mother arrived to pick him up from his shift at the pharmacy where he worked. When his shift ended, Robert told her he was going to speak briefly to a man about a construction job that would pay more than double his current wage. He told her it would only take a few minutes, and then they could go home and celebrate her birthday. She waited outside the pharmacy. Robert never came back. His panicked mother returned with her husband, their other children, and the family's 2 German shepherds, but there was no trace of Robert anywhere. The family drove directly to the police station and reported him missing. Lieutenant Kozenczak, whose own son attended the same high school as Robert, took their report. One of the first calls he made was to John Wayne Gacy. Gacy's friends and neighbors may have been oblivious to his past, but the police were not. Not only were they aware of his prior conviction in Iowa, they had also received multiple complaints about Gacy in recent years. In 1975, after an employee of his construction company vanished, the man's family pleaded with police to investigate Gacy, but they were ignored. In 1976, police ran surveillance on Gacy's home in connection with the disappearance of a young boy, but could not build a case. In 1977, a young man reported that Gacy had abducted him at gunpoint and harmed him. Gacy was arrested and admitted to the encounter, but claimed it was consensual, and prosecutors declined to proceed. Police were also becoming aware of a pattern of complaints involving a man named John who had been approaching young men in local parks, men who seemed to vanish after crossing his path. Despite all of this, Gacy had stayed one step ahead of the law, but his time was running out. After Robert's family filed their missing persons report, officers quickly connected the dots. Gacy's construction company had recently completed work at the very pharmacy where Robert had been employed. The connection was impossible to ignore. This time, police were taking Gacy seriously. Lieutenant Kozenczak contacted Gacy and asked him to come to the station for an interview. Gacy was cordial. He agreed. He said he'd be there within half an hour. Hours passed. No sign of Gacy. Then, at 3 a.m., he finally appeared, more than 4 hours late, covered in mud. The officer he had come to see was unavailable, and Gacy was sent on his way. Later, investigators learned that his car had been towed from a snowbank near the Des Plaines River at 2 a.m., just before he walked into the station. Armed with that information, officers served Gacy with a search warrant when he returned the following day. He handed over his keys and was held at the station while officers searched his home. There, they found a receipt for a roll of film that Robert's family confirmed belonged to him. Robert had been inside Gacy's home, but with no direct evidence of a crime, Gacy was released and placed under surveillance. The next day, officers found a ring connected to another missing young man. Former employees of Gacy's construction company described 2 colleagues who had disappeared without explanation in recent months. Days later, Gacy had the nerve to invite the officers watching his home inside for coffee. Once inside, both officers noticed an overwhelming smell of decay rising from somewhere beneath the house. That same day, Gacy's legal team filed a lawsuit against the police department for harassment. He was running out of time, and somewhere deep down, he knew it. While under around-the-clock surveillance, officers witnessed Gacy in a drug transaction with a gas station clerk. He was arrested on the spot. While held in custody on those charges, police threatened to pull up the floorboards of his home, and something in Gacy gave way. He admitted to a killing. He told officers that he had taken a life inside his home, but claimed it was in self-defense. He showed them exactly where beneath his garage the body had been buried. During the search for that body, officers discovered a concealed entrance leading to a crawl space below the house. Inside, surrounded by an overpowering smell of decay, they found the remains of at least 3 more individuals. Once Gacy understood that police had found the bodies, he broke completely. In a long, disjointed confession, in which he referred to himself in the third person, Gacy told officers that a darker side of himself, a persona he called Jack Hanley, had taken the lives of at least 32 young men. He stated that he had buried 29 of the bodies on his property and had disposed of the remaining 4, including Robert Pist, in the Des Plaines River. In fact, Gacy had been disposing of Robert's remains in that very river on the night his car was towed from the snowbank, the same night he had walked into the police station covered in mud. Gacy was charged with the taking of Robert Pist's life, although his remains had not yet been recovered. By January 8, 1979, police had located the remains of 29 victims, but only 7 had been positively identified. Gacy was formally charged with those 7 counts as investigators continued their painstaking efforts to put names to the others. Parents of missing young men from across the world contacted Chicago police to ask if their sons were among the victims. Forensic specialists and dental experts were brought in to assist with identification using dental records, the most reliable method available in the years before DNA technology. In April 1979, a grand jury indicted Gacy on a total of 33 counts, the largest number attributed to any single individual in U.S. history at that time. Throughout the investigation, Gacy continued to speak with police and provided disturbing details about his first offense, describing how he had concealed the body in the crawl space. Officers found evidence in his bedroom that confirmed his account. A red light and police radio, discovered in his vehicle, led investigators to conclude that he had posed as a law enforcement officer to approach and detain his victims. As the trial date approached, Robert Pist's remains had still not been found, but his jacket had been recovered from beneath the floor of Gacy's laundry room. In January 1979, at the height of the investigation, the Chicago Metropolitan Clown Guild held a press conference. They stated that the Gacy case was causing serious harm to the city's professional clown community. Parents no longer felt comfortable having their children anywhere near a clown, not after learning about Gacy's crimes and his alter ego, Pogo the Clown. Gacy's neighbors recalled that he had frequently joked about how clowns could get away with anything. At the same time, they had laughed it off. They had no idea how seriously he meant it. John Wayne Gacy's trial began on February 6, 1980. Due to the disturbing nature of the evidence, the judge barred anyone under the age of 16 from the courtroom. Gacy pleaded not guilty. His legal team pursued a defense based on diminished mental capacity, arguing that Gacy could not be held fully responsible for his actions. The prosecution dismantled that argument methodically, walking the jury through 33 counts of deliberate, calculated criminal conduct, each one planned, each one intentional. After a 5-week trial, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all 33 counts. State Attorney Bernard Carey was quoted as saying, "He certainly qualifies for the most severe penalty available. If he does not, then who does?" Gacy was sentenced to death and transferred to Menard Correctional Center to await his execution. Gacy spent the next 14 years on death row as his automatic appeals worked through the courts. During that time, he took up painting, producing a series of unsettling images of, predictably, clowns. Several of those paintings were auctioned off alongside other inmates' work to raise funds for art supplies. Years later, 2 local businessmen purchased 30 of those paintings and invited the families of Gacy's victims to destroy them in a public bonfire. After nearly 15 years, all of Gacy's appeals had been exhausted. His execution date was set for May 10th, 1994. For his final meal, Gacy ordered a bucket of KFC original recipe chicken, French fries, 12 fried shrimp, and a pound of fresh strawberries. It was a telling choice. Before his years of criminal activity, Gacy had actually managed 3 KFC restaurants owned by his former father-in-law. On the night of his execution, he was transferred from Menard to Stateville Correctional Center, where he reportedly spent his final hours, chatting with visitors, discussing the Chicago Cubs, and making easy conversation, as though the end were not approaching at all. Shortly before midnight, he was brought to the execution chamber. Outside the prison, more than 1,000 people had gathered. The crowd was largely in favor of the execution. The noise outside was loud enough to be heard from within the building itself. As Gacy was secured to the gurney and asked if he had any final words, he reportedly offered 3. Words that contained no remorse, no acknowledgement, and no apology for the 33 lives he had taken. At 12:58 a.m. on May 10th, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was pronounced dead. He showed no remorse. Not once. Not ever. At the time of Gacy's execution, only 26 of his 33 victims had been positively identified. DNA technology in the years that followed helped investigators close several of those cases, including the 2011 identification of William George Bundy, a Chicago man who told his family he was going to a party and was never seen again. As of today, 5 of the killer clown's victims remain unidentified. The Cook County Sheriff's Office continues to seek DNA contributions from families of men who disappeared in the Chicago area during the 1970s. 3 victims have been named since 2011, but 5 young men are still waiting to be brought home. As a direct result of Gacy's crimes, Chicago police spearheaded the creation of a computerized national database of missing and lost young people, making it easier for law enforcement agencies across the country to share information and communicate, in the hope that a predator like Gacy could never go undetected for so long again. John Wayne Gacy took the lives of 33 young men and concealed their remains beneath his own home. He had appeared to be a successful businessman and a pillar of his community. He shook hands with the First Lady. He made children laugh in a clown costume. He hosted his neighbors for dinner and threw block parties that everyone looked forward to. But behind every single one of those smiles was something cold, calculated, and entirely without conscience. Hiding behind the facade was America's most dangerous criminal, John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown.